What happens when the man who launched rockets pauses, live on air, to pray with his son? Elon Musk and little X stepped onto a TV stage expecting questions, but instead found something eternal. And what they said next, hand in hand, eyes closed, left millions in stunned silence. What really happened that night? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Backstage at the studio, the air buzzed with quiet energy. Elon Musk sat beside his son X at a small round table, a plate of half-eaten waffles between them. X had syrup on his chin and was humming a tune, completely unfazed by the flurry of camera crews and production assistants moving in and out of the room. Elon, in contrast, dabbed gently at his son's face with a napkin. "You nervous, Dad?" X asked, looking up with wide eyes. "I've been on TV a lot," Elon replied with a soft smile. "But never with you." X grinned. "Then it's new for both of us." A knock at the door interrupted them. The producer stepped in, followed by a tall man with kind eyes and a calm presence. "Elon, this is Pastor David Miller," the producer introduced. "He'll be part of the second segment." Pastor Miller reached out a hand. "Mr. Musk, it's an honor." "Please, call me Elon," he replied, shaking the man's hand. Miller knelt slightly to meet X's gaze. "And who's this?" "I'm X," the boy answered proudly. "My dad builds rockets." Pastor Miller chuckled. "That's amazing. But I think tonight we might be launching something even more important." As they were called to set, the studio lights glowed bright white. Elon adjusted his jacket. X adjusted nothing. He was already ready. "Dad," X said quietly, "what should I say if they ask me questions?" Elon leaned down, brushed a hand over his son's hair, and replied gently, "Just be yourself. That's all you ever need to do." The door opened. The audience applause began, and as father and son stepped into the light together, Elon felt something unfamiliar rise inside him. A sense that this wasn't just a show. It was a turning point. The set of Heart to Heart felt warmer than Elon expected. Host Hannah Reynolds welcomed them with a genuine smile, easing the tension as she turned toward Elon. "Most of the world knows you as an inventor, an entrepreneur," she began. "But tonight, I want to ask, what's it like being a father?" Elon glanced at X, who was swinging his feet just above the studio floor. "Being a father," Elon said slowly, "has been the most humbling and clarifying experience of my life. X asks questions no algorithm can solve." Hannah turned to X. "What kinds of questions do you ask your dad?" Without hesitation, X replied, "Why are we here? Is there more than just Earth? What happens after we die?" The audience stirred gently. Elon gave a soft laugh and nodded. "That's exactly what he asks. Children expect honest answers, but some of those I'm still searching for myself." The room grew quieter. "Have your children changed how you see those bigger questions?" Hannah asked gently. Elon's tone shifted. "They've made those questions impossible to ignore," he said, urgent even. As he spoke, something softened. The armor of the public figure faded, replaced by a man wrestling, not with code, but with meaning. And the journey was just beginning. As the conversation unfolded, Hannah leaned in slightly. "Elon, you mentioned your son's questions, made things feel more urgent. Can you tell us what you mean?" Elon hesitated, then nodded. "There's a common assumption that success brings clarity, but in my experience, it often does the opposite. It gave me access to everything I thought I wanted, and still, I found myself awake at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling, wondering what it all means." He spoke without polish, just truth. I've spent my life at launch pads, in boardrooms, on stages, but the questions didn't go away. If anything, they got louder. Why are we here? Why does love matter more than logic? What happens after this life ends? He shifted slightly in his chair. I started reading not just science, but spiritual texts. The Bible, the Tao Te Ching, Buddhist sutras, even old tribal myths. I wanted to understand what threads connect all these stories. What are we all trying to touch? X looked up at him with quiet attention, like he'd heard this before. Lately? He draws stars a lot, Elon said, looking at his son. One day he asked, "Dad, did someone make the stars, or did they just happen?" Elon paused. For the first time, I couldn't give him a confident answer. The audience sat still, hanging on each word. I realized I've built rockets that escape Earth's gravity, but I hadn't answered the gravity in my own soul. Hannah's voice softened. "And what have you found?" Elon looked down, then back up, his voice steady but vulnerable. "I'm beginning to think science alone may not be enough. It explains how, but I'm not sure it can explain why." The lights above seemed dimmer now, not in brightness, but in mood. A hush settled over the room, not of silence, but of searching. And somewhere between a father's voice and a child's questions, something sacred began to stir. As the show returned from its first break, Hannah smiled at the camera. We're back with Elon Musk and his son X. And now, joining us on set is Pastor David Miller, a man known not just for his spiritual leadership, but also for his deep respect for science and humanitarian work. Pastor, welcome. Pastor Miller leaned forward to shake Elon's hand again, this time in front of a live studio audience. "Thank you, Hannah. Elon, it's a pleasure." "The same," Elon said, giving a respectful nod. Hannah turned toward them both. "Pastor Miller, earlier Elon spoke about the limits of science when it comes to explaining purpose. Do you see a bridge between scientific inquiry and faith?" "I do," Pastor Miller replied. "Some of the greatest scientific minds in history believed their work was a way to understand God's creation. Isaac Newton once said, 'This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent being.'" Elon nodded. That quote always stayed with me. Newton, Kepler, even modern thinkers like Francis Collins. None of them saw a conflict between science and belief. Collins led the Human Genome Project and also wrote about finding God through science. "Exactly," Pastor Miller said. "Science asks how, but faith dares to ask why. They can be allies in the search for truth." At that moment, X reached into his lap and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it up proudly for everyone to see. "This is my drawing," he said. It showed two stick figures, one tall, one small, standing under a sky filled with stars. In the center was a bright golden light. "Is that the sun?" Hannah asked gently. "No," X said seriously. "That's where I think heaven might be. Up there, with the light." The audience let out a soft, collective murmur. Pastor Miller smiled warmly. "Maybe X already sees what many adults miss." Elon looked at the picture for a long moment, visibly moved. "He'll drool that the night after asking me if someone made the stars. I didn't have an answer, so I just said, maybe both are amazing. And then he brought me this." "It's beautiful," Hannah said softly. "Children often express truths we adults haven't figured out how to say." Pastor Miller turned toward Elon. "That wonder, that sense that there's more beyond what we can measure. That's where faith begins for many people. Not as an escape from science, but as a complement to it." Elon leaned back, thoughtful. "I've spent years studying physics, cosmology, quantum mechanics, and yet the more I understand the structure of the universe, the fine-tuning, the elegant constants, the harder it is to believe it's all just random. It feels intentional. You're describing what many theologians and scientists alike have come to believe, Pastor Miller said gently. That behind all of this, galaxies, gravity, DNA, there may be a mind, a presence. Elon nodded slowly. And if that's true, it changes everything. The studio remained silent for a moment. Then Hannah, her voice calm but clear, asked the question everyone was wondering. Villain, with all this reflection, have you ever talked to Jesus? The question landed like a stone dropped in still water. Elon looked over at X, then at Pastor Miller, then back at Hannah. For a moment, he didn't speak. He seemed to be turning something over in his heart. And in that silence, a new kind of tension settled across the studio. Not dramatic, but sacred. The kind that comes just before something real. Something no one could have scripted. Elon sat quietly, his hands resting on his lap. The question lingered in the air like electricity. Have you ever talked to Jesus? He looked at Hannah, then Pastor Miller, and finally at X, whose eyes were full of curiosity, not pressure. He let out a slow breath. Not since I was a child, Elon said softly. Maybe I did back then, when things felt scary, or when I didn't have anyone else to talk to. But as I grew up, I guess I stopped believing anyone was listening. X tilted his head. Can we talk to him now? The studio fell silent again. Hannah's eyes widened slightly. The camera crew didn't move. No one knew what would happen next. Elon looked at his son. His heart was pounding, but not from fear, from the weight of the moment. He turned to Pastor Miller. Would that even be appropriate here? I mean, this is live television. Pastor Miller smiled gently. There's no wrong time to pray, Elon. Only honest ones. And if your heart is sincere, it doesn't matter where you are. Faith isn't a performance. It's a relationship. Elon hesitated for a second longer, then looked back at X. You really want to? X nodded with complete seriousness. Tommy at school said Jesus listens, even when you whisper. Elon gave a quiet, almost trembling laugh. Then he nodded. Okay, yes, I think I'd like that. We'd like that. Pastor Miller leaned forward, drawing his chair closer. Then let's keep it simple. No need for fancy words, just truth. The cameras kept rolling. The audience didn't stir. Pastor Miller bowed his head. If you'd like, repeat after me. Or change the words. It's about your heart, not a script. He paused, then began. Dear Jesus, we come to you today with open hearts. Elon hesitated only a second before repeating. Dear Jesus, we come to you today with open hearts. X echoed him, his voice clear and confident. We believe you are real, and that you made this universe we're still trying to understand. Elon and X repeated the words, one voice deep, the other young and full of wonder. We ask you to come into our lives, to help us know you personally, to guide us toward truth and purpose. They repeated each line, phrase by phrase. Elon's voice grew steadier. X squeezed his father's hand. We accept your love and forgiveness, and we choose to follow you from this day forward. Thank you for hearing us. Amen, Elon and X said together. Elon kept his eyes closed for a moment longer, his hand still holding his son's. When he opened them, something in his face had changed. There was no flash of light, no dramatic sound, but something quiet and unmistakable had shifted. His eyes, so often scanning for data, now held something different. Peace. He looked at X, who was beaming with satisfaction. Pastor Miller didn't speak. He just smiled gently, giving Elon the space to feel what needed to be felt. Hannah finally spoke, her voice almost a whisper. Elon, what are you feeling right now? Elon blinked slowly. He looked down, then back up. I don't fully know how to describe it, he said. But it's like Something I've been searching for just came into focus. Not an answer I figured out. A presence I finally noticed. And as the audience sat in stillness, millions of viewers watched one of the world's most influential minds bow his head, guided not by science or success, but by the hand of his son. And something had changed. Hannah leaned forward gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elon, what are you feeling right now?" Elon didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, still clasped around X's. The moment had taken him somewhere he hadn't expected to go, not just emotionally, but spiritually. He finally raised his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was steady but softer than before. "Clarity," he said, "and peace, like something that's been blurry for a long time, just came into focus." The studio remained perfectly still, the audience completely silent, as if they too were afraid to break the sacred atmosphere. "I've spent most of my life chasing answers," Elon continued. "Through science, technology, logic. I've built rockets to leave Earth, neural networks to study the brain, machines to shape the future. But today," he paused and looked at X, "today I realize the greatest journey may not be to Mars or through AI. It might be toward meaning, toward something, someone greater." X looked up at his dad and smiled. "Jesus is our friend now, right, Dad?" Elon chuckled gently, a sound filled with warmth and wonder. "Yes, buddy," he said, nodding. "I believe he is." Pastor Miller sat back slightly, allowing the moment to settle. Hannah's eyes glistened as she observed what was unfolding, not just a father and son praying, but two lives beginning a new path together. Elon turned to Hannah. "It's strange," he said. "I've done interviews on the biggest stages in the world, but nothing has ever felt this real, this unscripted. I didn't plan to talk about faith or prayer or any of this today, but now that it's happened, I can't imagine not sharing it." "You're not the only one feeling that," Hannah replied softly. "I think everyone watching can sense this wasn't about cameras or headlines. It was about truth." Elon nodded. "It's amazing how a 5-year-old can cut through all the noise." X grinned proudly and sat up straighter in his chair. "I think I've been avoiding these questions for a long time," Elon admitted. "Maybe because they're not easily solved like equations, but they're the ones that matter most. Questions about love, about purpose, about what happens when we're done building and chasing and inventing." Pastor Miller finally spoke again. "And the beauty of those questions," he said, "is that they don't need to be answered all at once. They just need to be asked honestly." Elon nodded in agreement. "And maybe that's what faith is. Not knowing everything, but being willing to walk forward anyway." Hannah looked toward the cameras, sensing the moment drawing to a close. "Elon, X, Pastor Miller, thank you. This was more than an interview. It was a moment." As the studio lights dimmed slightly and the music began to play, the camera captured Elon reaching down to help X out of his chair. The boy took his father's hand and squeezed it tightly. Together they walked off the stage, not with fanfare or applause, but with quiet purpose. Behind them, the audience sat in reverent silence. No one rushed for autographs. No one shouted questions. It was as if they knew something rare had just taken place. A private turning point made public. And for Elon Musk, a new journey, perhaps the most important one yet, had only just begun. The morning after the broadcast, Elon awoke to a phone filled with messages, social media notifications, emails, texts, thousands of them. Some came from strangers, others came from people he'd known for decades, business leaders, scientists, skeptics, believers. Many said the same thing in different ways. Something happened last night. He scrolled slowly, not looking for praise, but trying to understand what had been set in motion. A message from a physics professor caught his eye. It read, "For years I've kept my faith private, hidden behind equations and academic expectations, but your honesty gave me permission to believe again. Thank you." Another message, this one from a well-known journalist. "I'm not reaching out for a quote. I just need to talk. Watching you and your son changed something in me." Elon sat back in his chair, overwhelmed, not by the attention, but by the weight of it all. This wasn't trending because of spectacle. It was resonating because it was real. Later that afternoon, while X colored rockets at the kitchen table, Elon sat beside him. He watched his son quietly for a moment before speaking. "Buddy, do you know how many people watched us yesterday?" X looked up. "A lot?" "A lot," Elon confirmed. "Millions, and a lot of them said it made them think about God in a new way." X set down his crayon. "Does that mean more people are talking to Jesus now?" "Maybe," Elon said. "Maybe it helped open some hearts." X looked thoughtful. "Can we go back on TV again?" Elon smiled. "Why do you want to go back?" "So we can tell more people about Jesus?" X said simply. "If it helped one person, maybe it can help more." Elon nodded, struck by the clarity in his son's voice. "That's a good reason," he said. "A really good one." He glanced back at his phone, at the flood of stories pouring in. Stories of people finding courage, reconnecting with their faith, starting conversations they'd been too afraid to have. "This isn't just going viral," Elon murmured. "It's reaching something deeper." That evening, he sat on the balcony under a star-filled sky. For the first time, he wasn't looking at the stars for exploration. He was seeing them as signs. And quietly, he began to wonder, what if the most important thing he'd ever build wasn't a machine or a company or even a legacy? What if it was a path, a way forward, a bridge between minds and hearts, a mission that reached not just into space, but into souls? In the days following the broadcast, Elon received a flood of interview requests. Major news networks, podcasts, opinion writers, everyone wanted a follow-up. But he declined them all, not out of fear, to adaptive focus. He chose instead to spend his mornings with X, eating waffles and praying together before school. It wasn't formal or rehearsed, just simple words, honest words. A quiet moment between father and son. Before facing the noise of the world, they started attending church on Sundays. Pastor Miller never made a show of their presence, never asked Elon to speak from the pulpit. He just welcomed them with warmth and consistency. One afternoon, Pastor Miller sat in Elon's home study, sipping coffee as sunlight filtered through the window. Books were scattered across Elon's desk, science journals beside a well-worn Bible. "I used to think faith and science were enemies," Elon said. "But now I think faith doesn't replace science. It completes it." Pastor Miller nodded slowly. "Truth comes in many forms, sometimes in formulas, sometimes in whispers." That evening, Elon posted a single sentence to his social media accounts. "We didn't plan it, but it was the most real moment of my life." The post went viral in minutes, but Elon didn't watch it trend. He was sitting on the floor, helping X build a cardboard model of the solar system. And somewhere in that quiet, he began to understand something deeper. This wasn't just about what happened on television. It was about what might happen next. A professor in Ohio, a student in Kenya, a family in Nebraska. People from every corner of life had written in, not because of Elon's achievements, but because a father and son had prayed, and somehow it gave others permission to hope again. Elon looked at X and smiled. "You know we started, buddy?" X shrugged, crayon in hand. "Something good?" Elon nodded. "Yeah, something really good." And in that moment, he realized they hadn't just opened a door for themselves. They had opened a door for millions. 6 months after the broadcast that changed everything, Elon and X returned to the same studio, walking once more under the bright lights. This time not with uncertainty, but with quiet confidence. The world had watched their first steps of faith, but now they had something more to share. When asked if he would make the same decision again, Elon didn't hesitate. "Absolutely," he said, "because truth is still truth, even when it surprises you." X sat beside him, swinging his feet just like before, but older now, wiser. When the cameras turned to him, he smiled and said, "Jesus isn't just for people on TV. He's for everybody." As they left the studio, a staff member handed Elon a bundle of handwritten letters. Hundreds of them. Some were from scientists, some from soldiers, some from parents and children. Each one said, in its own way, that their story had sparked something real. If you felt that same stirring, if you're searching for answers, for peace, for something more, maybe it's time to start your own conversation. Subscribe for more inspiring stories of hope, faith, and the quiet moments that change everything. Because sometimes the greatest discovery isn't out there. It's the one that brings you home.